It's a grindstone, whether it wears you down. Oh, what's wrong with that?
I don't know. I think operator error.
It was working earlier.
When all else fails, blame Mark.
Right, it's probably Mark's fault. It's always.
That's what my parents say to you, Brad.
That is true.
Interesting. Well, looks like you guys are only going to have one screen today.
We'll have to sit on the right-hand side.
$5 a seat.
You didn't do anything different this
Nope. But it came on initially.
More technical, man.
Oh, yeah, this road, it's like.
Oh, just, I should turn it off and then reset, a little like a reset.
Yes.
Oh, there you go. No?
Let's see. It is different. Well, let's see what happens. Oops. Magic.
It's amazing how just turning something off and turning it back on.
The boy knows his stuff.
So I think half my problems. The other half I don't care.
So the quote I have here as we start this study on the book of Esther is that life is a grindstone, right?
Well, Esther has a hyphen now, so it's Estor.
I don't know why. Okay, well,
It'll
it's
go.
working. Life is a grindstone. Okay, let's get past this quote. Life is a grindstone. Whether it wears you down or polishes you depends on what you are made of. And this lady, Esther, she is a giant of faith. She's a strong woman. I know that oftentimes people, it's more like to make a controversy out of this. They try to divide, therefore talk about women, talk about men, and put them in different categories, and they try to put one against the other. And oftentimes they'll say that in the Bible, you know, being a woman is just not the greatest thing in the world because women are at a different level, more inferior, some suggest. But we see time and time again very strong women in the Bible that are making a significant impact on their family, on their community. A little while ago, we studied about Hannah and what a strong woman she was. And then now today we're talking about Esther. This woman, as we're going to see through the study today, she saved her entire nation. There's no, I think there's no other woman, there's no other person, man or woman, throughout the history of Israel that had such an impact on preventing her nation from being destroyed, really, as it was Esther. So, as I mentioned, describes the most serious threat to the existence of the Jewish people, not equal with anything until, of course, the Nazi Holocaust in the 40s, but the existential threat that the Jews were looking at in the time of Esther that is comparable with what happened during the Nazi Holocaust. Okay, of course, during Esther, she was able to avoid all that, but it was a very trying time for her nation. So it shows the sovereignty of God at work, the big picture over the most powerful ruler at the time, and the providence of God at work on behalf of his people. So God certainly is with her, and through it all, as she prays to God for her nation to be saved. And let's get a little bit of the story. So as far as the book is concerned, this is kind of small, but it's got 10 chapters. We're going to see in the first 2 chapters, we have the Feast of Ahasuerus, then we have the Fast of Mordecai, Feast of Mordecai, Feast of Easter, Feast of Purim. So everything happened in Persia, and I have here another chart about the kings.
Can you go back to the year just one more time? I just want to see the year. Okay.
Yes, and I have more years here. So it happened during the reign of the king Xerxes. Another name was, the Bible name for King Xerxes was Ahasuerus. That's how it's presented in the Bible. But The events in the book of Esther took place between 486 to 465. So if you remember, it was during King Cyrus, when King Cyrus came to power. Obviously this is Persian Empire. What was the kingdom before the Persian Empire? Babylonian. So Persian Empire took over the Babylonian Empire, and then as soon as he took power, King Cyrus released a proclamation saying, okay, now all the Jews, you can go back, right? And they started to go back. Remember, it was in several phases. The first phase was happening shortly after, and then now you are around the year 486. And there were still a lot of Jews in Persia when this happened. So in chapter 1, we see how Esther became a queen. So, and the chapter 1 starts with a great banquet of Xerxes or King Ahasuerus, and we are introduced to Queen Vashti or Vashti in Esther chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. So these banquets hosted by the king were just an occasion to drink, I guess. The guests were very high-level people like nobles, military leaders of Persia. And imagine a feast that lasts 7 days. So most likely the purpose was just the prideful show of the king's wealth and splendor, look at me kind of thing. So, and we see then Vashti's dethronement. She refused to obey the king. Let's please read what happened. Volunteer, let's please read verses 10 through 12. So, 10 through 12. So far what we see is that we have this fancy king throwing out a party, long time, with all his most important people. And then at one point, Elena, what happens?
On the seventh day, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he commanded...
In other words, he was drunk. Go ahead.
He commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, and Bigtha, and Agatha, Zethar, and Carcas, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him.
So, okay, you get the picture. For those of you that are not very familiar with this story, you have a king, mighty king of Persia, greatest kingdom on earth at the time, and he had a big party with his friends, 7 days, got drunk, and he says, boy, I should bring my wife here to show everybody how beautiful she is. And they go to pick up his wife, Queen Vashti, and she says, I'm not going there. Those are a bunch of drunk people. I'm not going to parade in front of them. I'm not going. And of course, he didn't like it. Not to mention he was drunk, not very good in his mind to be able to think reason. But at the time, whatever the king said, whatever the king wanted, the king got. And, in the end, it turns out that Queen Vashti's, her refusal, it's going to cost her a lot because she's going to end up losing her position as queen. So, obviously a stupid choice. Xerxes placed Vashti on display before a crowd of a drunken man. Didn't want to do that. Can't really blame her if you think about it. Most women would say, are you kidding me? I'm not doing that. But obviously back then, consider Xerxes was a very powerful man. It's not a normal wife, right? She didn't get the choice. She couldn't just have the choice to say, no, I won't. So obviously add anger to drunkenness and you have a recipe for disaster. However, God used this opportunity for something good that happened in the end. So, what was the wise man's advice? We see the wise man's advice in chapter 1, verses 12 to 22. I don't think I have it here, but let's read it, please. Let's read it. I don't have it here. So, somebody read it. Chapter 1, Lisa, verses 13 to 22. So, he was enraged. He was really, really unhappy. And then his other drunk buddies, I guess, they have a great idea, and he listened to them. Lisa, what was their idea?
Then the king said to the wise men who understood the times, for this was the king's manner toward all who knew law and justice, Elishana, Shethar, Admantha, Tarshish, Meres, Marsena, and Memnon, the 7 princes of Persia and Media who had access to the king's presence and who ranked highest in the kingdom. What shall we do to Queen Vashti according to the law, because she did not obey the command of King Ahasuerus brought by the eunuchs? And Memucan answered before the king and princes, Queen Vashti has not only wronged the king, but also all the princes and all the people who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will become known to all women, so that they will despise their husbands in their eyes, and they report King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought in before him, but she did not come. This very day the noble ladies of Persian Media will say to all the king's officials that they have heard of the behavior of the queen. Thus there will be excessive contempt and wrath. If it pleases the king, let a royal decree go out from him, and let it be recorded in the laws of the Medes and the Persians and the Medes, so that it will not be altered, that Vashti shall come no more before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. When the king's decree which he will make is proclaimed throughout all the empire, for it is great, all wives will honor their husbands, both great and small. And the reply pleased the king and princes, and the king did according to the word of Memucan. Then he sent letters to all the king's provinces, to each province in its own script, and to every people in their own language, that each man should be master in his own house, and speak in the language of his own people.
Okay, so we see the picture here. Not going to go too much into it. It says, just forget Vashti. Get yourself another wife. Just done with her. Be done with her. And that's exactly what he does.
Is that scriptural authority then? Is that what that is? No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
Old Testament, I guess.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Rhett.
I'm rather impressed with the reserve of the king.
To what, kill her?
Well, he could have.
But he probably loved her. I still love her. Yes.
But the thing is, I don't really think he loved her at all. Their position as queen seemed to be more of a position of display.
Right.
Because even Esther, I mean, she can't go before the king unless she's someone.
Right.
I mean, it's just the way things are, you know.
Right.
And I laugh because go try to see the president.
Right.
You're not going to see the president.
Right.
You're going to be invited to see the president.
Right.
You know, it's just a hierarchy of order.
Right.
And they take the time to discuss the matter, which is impressive to me. They remove her from position, but that's it. That's the end of her as far as queen.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's just amazing that they take the time. And I actually like their conclusion.
Well,
I mean, the disrespect is kind of
right.
like spare the rod, spoil the child. You don't
Right.
do it, they disrespect you, and then you have
yeah.
children running rampant.
Right. And then you can imagine all the other women will say, well, the king can do that. I can do the same thing, right? I mean, I'm not suggesting is right, because I still think that goes against, we live in a very different world, right? I mean, we have to be considerate, and, you know, in the New Testament is very different how men are supposed to treat his women, right? And you don't just say, come on, honey, come over here so they can see how beautiful you are because I'm drunk. I mean, no woman in their right mind says, yay, I can't wait to go and just parade myself in front of your drunk friends. Yeah, that would totally not work in today's day and age, right? And it wouldn't be right. Right.
And yet, your 1%ers do it every day.
What do you mean?
All the rich people, they got the trophy wife and they present this.
Well, right. I mean, the ones that you see in the media, because there's lots of very successful and wise people that they have a great relationship. And to really go to the point, I just read a statistic nowadays that says that people that are truly successful, it's because of their wives, really. I mean, the wives have a lot of part in it. They say that behind a strong man is always a strong woman, right?
I don't disagree with that.
What was that?
I don't
No, right. So, but it's true. You know what I'm saying? It's obviously what you're saying is not, it's true. A lot of people treat their wives like that, but it's not really how God intends for us to treat our women.
Right, we should be, it's carnal thinking.
Right. Absolutely.
Ephesians 5:23.
Yeah.
Right.
First love the church.
Yes, exactly. So, their solution to the problem, so remove Vashti as queen, make a law, give him an absolute rule in their own households. Okay, that was just back then, worked for them. And that's chapter 1. Then we go to chapter 2, and they are going into the process of choosing a new queen. First part of the chapter is about the discovery of Esther, how they found her. Middle there is a devotion of Mordecai. So we already saw, let's find the replacement for Vashti. The search for a new queen was empire-wide. They end up having this search and fight order to find the right. And they picked up a lot of beautiful women, right? And who was the fairest of them all? Her name was Esther, right? So physical beauty was probably a key qualification, but the work could obviously could include pleasant disposition, cheerful attitude. Looks is not always the only thing that makes, right, a woman beautiful, right? I mean, she could be beautiful outside, but having a bad attitude is not good. So it had to do more than just looks. It had to be just a really wonderful person, disposition, cheerful attitude. So Xerxes accepts the recommendation, and let's please read what happens. Chapter 2, verses 5 through 9. Who wants to read this? Tracy.
Now there was a Jew in Susa, the citadel, whose name was Mordecai.
Okay, Susa, a citadel. What is this? This was the capital of Persian Empire. This is like Washington, D.C. is for the United States, right? Go ahead. That's where the king lived, yes.
Whose name was Mordecai?
Mordecai.
The son of Jair, the son of Shimei, son of Kish, a Benjamin, who had been carried away from Jerusalem among the captives, carried away with Jeconiah, king of Judah, who Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, had carried away. He was bringing up Hadassah, that is Esther, the daughter of his uncle, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman had a beautiful figure and was lovely to look at. And when her father and her mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. Okay, so you see that. Esther, poor girl, had no mother, no father, was raised up by her uncle. And she was beautiful, okay? So among all the other young women brought to the capital, Esther soon became a favorite. And she turned out that she's the one that won the contest. So, yes, Lisa.
It says that she was his uncle's daughter, so wouldn't that have made them cousins?
What do you mean, uncle's daughter?
It says that Mordecai brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother, so that would have been a cousin, no?
Well, I guess how you look at it, a cousin's uncle's daughter.
Would have been a first cousin, so he was bringing up his first cousin. Yes? Does everybody see that?
Uncle's daughter. I'm trying to think of the uncle's
Oh, good,
sisters.
you're not
Yes.
the only one. I have that same problem.
Do you?
I do all the time.
My uncle's son is Chris. Chris is my first cousin.
Something like that. Well, anyways, just live. I totally get it. I'm like Jim that way, trying to think about this person's who's. Just know that she was, I think, is considered here the uncle. So however you want to look at it. So obviously not no mother, no father, and she's beautiful. Okay, so let's keep on going. So several questions arise out of Mordecai's forbidding Esther to reveal anything about her nationality. If you remember, Mordecai says, please don't tell her you are a Jew. Maybe because there was some bias, maybe there's some discrimination against the fact that they were Jews, maybe because they were considered being slaves, because they were brought into captivity. Yes, sir?
If that's the case, then Mordecai was hoping that she would become queen, because he seems awfully concerned pacing the front gate on
Right.
a daily basis to find out what's going on.
Well, right. And you can imagine, I mean, I don't know, if I was a father, do I want my daughter to be paraded like that? And there's a lot of risk involved, right? And not to mention, I mean, I would much rather just have my daughter marry just some but in her own town to have a relationship, as opposed to send her to become part of some kind of harem, right, of a lot of women, right, for the king.
He's probably concerned for her
He's concerned for
well-being.
her well-being, yes. I mean, I imagine there's a lot of abuse. I mean, when you go to present yourself before the king, you are like property, right, back in the day. I mean, look what happened with Vashti, right? So obviously he was concerned, he cared about her.
I notice where it says that Esther also was taken to the king's palace.
Right,
So it wasn't something that
right,
anybody would say, hey, here's my
right. They're
my
probably
cousin,
just,
uncle, niece, daughter, whoever.
Probably don't have an option.
They just
Probably
picked
not.
up all the beautiful virgins.
Yeah.
And I don't think that anything really would have happened to the ones that didn't make it. They just kind of
maybe back home, maybe?
yeah. It's kind of interesting. But why
Yeah.
would Mordecai be so concerned about
Right.
him revealing that she was?
Yeah. Well, he was concerned about her for sure. And maybe he thought, as I mentioned, that being a Jewish woman wasn't maybe something very desirable at the time, considering they were just a nation that was just left there in their land, and maybe they were not anything proeminent. So since the Jews was discouraged from marrying Gentiles, maybe that's why, because obviously Jewish were encouraged to marry within their own faith, right? So why didn't Mordecai resist Esther's inclusion in the candidacy for queen? Maybe that's what it was, because he was going to be joined with Gentiles. Perhaps he was not given a choice, and he was just maybe fearful to object. But let's please read verse 12. This is the traditional procedure, what happened as far as process. Verse 12, Esther 2:12, volunteer? Ava?
Now, when the turn came for each young woman to go into Canaan years, after being 12 months under the regulations for the women, since this was the regular period of their beautifying, 6 months with all people, with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with spices and ointments for women.
Take him 12 months to get her beautified. Before you present the king, 12 months with myrrh and 6 months with spices and ointments. She must have smelled like all kinds of spices after 12 months. But that's what happens. Chapter 2. Okay, so the attempt, then we see at the end of chapter 2, there's an attempt on the king's life. Somebody tries to kill the king, and Mordecai become aware, and there's a plan, two of his servants, to assassinate King Xerxes, and the plan is uncovered. Mordecai had access through Esther to warn the king and gave favor before the king. So it's just an event that happens that later on we're going to see that it's going to be a great thing that happened. So the two servants were found and they were executed, and this was recorded in the king's records right in the beginning of the book. Okay, that's chapter 2. Now we go to chapter 3. We see the decree of Haman. In chapter 3 we see this very interesting character. His name is Haman, which hated the Jews, wanted to exterminate them, and he's looking for a plot to exterminate the Jews, to kill the Jews, all the Jews. And instigated by Mordecai's refusal to bow to Haman, actually, that was what made him so upset, that he wanted to kill all the Jews. So Mordecai considered bowing before Haman as an act of sacrilege. And of course, he would not bow before anybody but God. And let's please read chapter 3, see what happens here, verses 8 and 9. Volunteer, Lisa.
And Haman said to King Ahasuerus, there is a certain people scattered and dispersed among the people in all the provinces of your kingdom. Their laws are different from all other people's, and they do not keep the king's laws. Therefore, it is not fitting for the king to let them remain. If it pleases the king, let a decree be written that they may be destroyed. And I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the hands of those who do the work, and bring it into the king's treasuries.
So, what a wicked way to, go to the king, because I have some pull with the king, get him write a decree to kill all the Jews, just like that. And what was he going to get in return? Money. So bribe. I'm going to give you 10,000 talents of silver. A talent of silver is a lot of money, by the way. Yes, sir.
Why do you think Mordecai didn't give honor to whom honor was due, as the Bible teaches us to do?
Because he conflicted with his God. I mean, if God tells you, don't bow before anybody but me, right? I mean, he wasn't gonna, look at Daniel, right? Daniel didn't bow. So I think that's really why, because he was about to, really his greatest sin was he didn't bow before.
It doesn't say anything about worshiping Haman, just
Well, right,
paying
but,
homage to him.
right.
He was lifted up to this very, very high, honorable position.
Yeah,
It would be like us if the president walked into that door right there. It would not be good for anybody to still be sitting.
of course.
Stand,
It's a respectful thing to do.
you know.
But this
I mean,
guy,
I'm just wondering.
well, right,
I know this is a providence of
right.
God in some laid out fashion.
right,
Because it's a book that's thrown in the middle of the whole Bible that has no
right.
relevance to much of anything.
Right.
And then it's there.
Right. So obviously, having a president or somebody very important walk into the door, you may stand up and greet them, right? Acknowledge their presence, but that's very different than bowing down, right, to them, because that's really what they wanted, what they're expecting, and that's why Mordecai didn't choose not to do that. So he saw it as an act of worship if I bow before you, right? So Xerxes' willingness to take the word of a one man concerning the whole nation of people stands as a very extreme example of a ruler out of touch with his country, very unwise. But back then, I guess kings could do whatever they wanted. And let's see what happens next. This plot goes on, chapter 3, verses 13 through 15. Who wants to read this? I'm going to choose on my friend Zach to read this. It's right here.
Letters were sent by couriers to all the king's provinces with instruction to destroy and to kill and to annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children. And one day, the 13th day of the 12th month, which is the month of Adar, and to plunder their goods. The couriers went out hurriedly by the order of the king, and the decree was issued in Susa, the citadel. And the king and Haman sat down to drink. But the king of Susa was thrown into confusion.
Can you imagine? So letters went out to kill and to annihilate all the Jews. That was a big, big deal, right? While they're just sitting down to drink. Very good. So then we go to chapter 4, and we see, I'm sorry.
Do it.
Apologize. I'm not sick. Chapter 4, we see Mordecai's plans. So Mordecai, bitter morning, came to Esther crying, you got to do something. And then his mourning was brought to Esther's attention. Esther's attendant was sent to ascertain the cause of Mordecai's. Why are you so upset? She didn't know, apparently, Esther, when that decree went out. And Mordecai's evidence of Haman's plot against the Jews were delivered to Esther, chapter 4, verses 6 through 8. And then Mordecai's instruction to Esther was, hey, you got some pull with the king. Go talk to the king. Do something. Do something. Don't just sit there. You think you're gonna escape? Your whole nation is gonna be destroyed. Your people, and you think you're gonna get away? And then we see in chapter 4 Esther's courageous faith. Chapter 4, verses 15 through 16. Who wants to read this? Go ahead, sir.
Then Esther told them to reply to Mordecai, go gather all the Jews to be found in Susa and hold a fast on my behalf, and do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my young women will also fast as you do. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish.
So you see what a powerful statement by Queen Esther. She could have risked anything. He could have killed her. You don't just, even as a queen, you don't go just in front of the king. The king has to call you to go in his presence. So it's not like he was talking to him casually every night, right? So obviously she understands that this is a very important, she's in a very unique position to be able to do something about it, right? And she does, which is amazing. So what they do before they fast, they pray, they fast, and also Esther was fasting with her maids. So Esther overcame the fear after some time of prayer and fasting and decided to risk her life to save her people. Esther here very much is a type of Christ, because that's exactly what Jesus did when he risked his life and really put his life on the line to save his people. And that's exactly what Esther is doing. So fear, yes, sir.
One of the things that Mordecai tells her that I think is very important, he looks at her and says straight to her face, don't think you're going to escape this.
Right.
You too are a Jew.
Right.
She's not just saving her people. She's
Save too.
kind of saving
Yes.
every Jew.
Yeah, absolutely. So fear certainly is best overcome by giving it to the Lord in prayer, and that's exactly what they do. You can understand that them being afraid is definitely something, a very real reality. Psalm 34, verse 4. Marcus, why don't you read this since you're so quiet?
I sought the Lord, and he answered me. He delivered me from all my fears.
Exactly. So that's what God does. And the psalmist there says, you're afraid, seek the Lord. The Lord will answer you. I have here a little bit of illustration, which I really like a lot. Whenever you have a challenge in your life, something really difficult, in the beginning it looks like this. But if you have faith in God, if you have a relationship with God, you can go, and if you add prayer, eventually that big problem becomes like a little pebble like this. This is very true of what happens when we have obstacles. And that rock may seem much, but Marcus, I'll put you on the spot. What did Jesus say that you can do if you have a mustard seed of faith?
Move mountains.
You can tell a mountain, get removed and cast yourself into the sea. If you have a faith as little as a mustard seed, and there's nothing you can accomplish if you have faith and you pray to God, especially if you add fasting, fasting is like the secret weapon of prayer when you pray. Anyways, I thought you would like to see this illustration. Very good. So life can certainly throw some very terrifying situations into our path, and terror will most likely be our initial reaction. And like Mordecai, you feel like, wailing and crying. Sometimes, you can wail and cry, but ultimately you go to God and then you put it in God's hands. If you allow the Holy Spirit an opportunity to work through our prayers, He promises to turn confusion and terror as we express it to God, and we can turn that into something positive, how God fixes that in our lives. So Romans chapter 8, verse 26 to 28, who wants to read this? I'm going to ask Luke. Luke, can you read this over here, please, on the screen?
In the same way, the Spirit helps us in our weakness. We do not know what we ought to pray for, but the Spirit Himself intercedes for us through anxious groanings. And He who searches our hearts knows the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for God's people in accordance with the will of God.
Very good. So because you have the Spirit of God dwelling in us, the Spirit intercedes for us. Okay, that takes us to chapter 5. We are halfway through this, and we have only 10 minutes to go. We can do it. You can do it. Okay. Chapter 5, this is Esther's audience with the king. She does go to the king, and then we see Haman's arrogance over Mordecai. So we have the presentation of Esther before the king. And of course, it was not a given that the king was going to receive her. And the king thankfully did receive her. And it's great that here's my beautiful new wife coming. She wants a word with me. And it's great to get the response instead of, you can come in my presence. You are a dead person. Xerxes says, you may ask whatever you want. I'll give you whatever you desire is yours, pretty much. I think he says up to half the kingdom or something like that. Very generous, right? So he says, and very clever how he goes about it. He doesn't just ask her what he wants. He could have said, it was a decree written, and can you please cancel that decree? Maybe because she knew that you can't just cancel a decree of the Medes and Persians. You can't. But she goes a little mysteriously by saying, you know what? Let's just have a banquet, okay? And I'll tell you. at the banquet. Come to the dinner tonight and bring your friend Haman. And she kind of drags it along to create this mystery. Ooh, what's going on? I wonder what's happening. Nobody had a clue at the time, but Haman gets up early and he was planning to actually hang Mordecai, but he must honor him instead. So if you can imagine, he was so mad about Mordecai, he was planning to kill him. And how was he going to kill him? Hang him. He built what do you call it? Gallows. And then he said, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill Mordecai. Let's see what happens instead. Esther 5:14. What does it say here? Lisa?
Then his wife Sarah and all his friends said to him, let a gallows 50 cubits high be made, and in order to tell the king to have Mordecai hanged upon it. Then go joyfully with the king to the feast. This idea pleased Haman, and he had the gallows made.
He was so mad that this Mordecai is still alive. Like, just hang him, and then go to be with the king. That's chapter 5. Then chapter 6, we see the deliverance of God's people, the defeat of Haman, and what happened. It's absolutely beautiful. It would make an amazing movie. I think there is a movie about it. You have it?
Yes.
Of course, you like movies. So we see Haman humbled. So right before that feast, the king couldn't sleep. And it's very possible that God intervened, and how God uses Xerxes' sleeplessness to draw attention to Mordecai's vital service to the king, because remember in Esther, earlier we read about Mordecai rescuing, saving the life of the king. And that is just the way to interrupt Haman's plan to execute Mordecai. Esther chapter 6, verses 6 through 9. Read somebody here. Elena?
So Haman came in, and the king said to him, what should be done to the man whom the king delights to honor? And Haman said to himself, who would the king delight to honor more than me? And Haman said to the king, the man whom the king delights to honor, let a royal robe be brought, which the king has worn, and let the horse that the king has ridden, on whose head a royal crown is set. And let the robes and the horse be handed over to one of the king's most noble officials. Let them dress the man whom the king delights to honor, and let them lead him on the horse through the square of the city, proclaiming before him, thus it shall be done to the man whom the king delights to honor.
Okay, so you get what happens here, right? So Xerxes just read about what Mordecai had done for him. And then when Haman comes into his presence, he wants to honor my Mordecai, but Haman thought he wants to honor him. And king says, go ahead and do to Mordecai this. Of course, he was mortified when he heard, because he was just going to kill him, right?
What's interesting too is the king says to Mordecai, or to Haman, so for Mordecai the Jew who sits.
Right.
He just signed a decree to kill all the Jews. This guy really doesn't think between the lines, does he?
Right. Well, to him, he saw 10,000 talents of silver. So then chapter 7, what happens in chapter 7 goes as the word of wisdom says, that if you dig someone's grave, you fall yourself in it. So then there's a second banquet and petition, and then the request of Queen Esther before the king really was to spare the life of Esther and her people, and the revelation of Haman as the architect of the plan to exterminate Esther's people is revealed. So let's please read Esther chapter 7, first 3 verses. Who wants to read this? Tracy.
So the king and Haman went into feast with Queen Esther. And on the second day, as they were drinking wine after the feast, the king again said to Esther, what is your wish, Queen Esther? It shall be granted to you. And what is your request? Even to the half of my kingdom it shall be fulfilled. And Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor in your sight, O king, and if it please the king, let my life be granted me for my wish, and my people for my request.
Says, I'm not asking much. I just asked for my life and the life of my people. And let's please read also verses 4 through 6. Lisa?
For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, and to be annihilated. If we had been sold, king. Then King Ahasuerus said to Queen Esther, "Who is he and where is he who has dared to do this?" And Esther said, "A foe, an enemy, the wicked Haman, this wicked Haman." Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen.
So Haman was right there. Who did this? Well, this guy right here. And I love the next part. Actually, I'm not going to read this because the king was very upset, right? And then next, I love this part because as all that confusion was happening and the king was so mad. And I'm going to ask my good reader Ava to read this brilliant idea that one of the eunuchs had, how to deal with Haman. Ava?
Then Harbona, one of the eunuchs in attendance on the king, said, "Moreover, the gallows that Haman has prepared for Mordecai, whose word saved the king, is standing at Haman's house 50 cubits high." And the king said, "Hang him on that." So they hanged Haman on the gallows that he prepared for Mordecai. Then the wrath of the king was abated.
So Harbona, one of the eunuchs in the attendance, says, "Hey, what is all this commotion? I mean, the gallows are still there. Let's just hang him there. We're done with it. How convenient." And then they did that. And then that's how this wicked Haman ended, being hanged on the gallows he set up for his enemy. So that really is the main story. And of course, as we go in chapter 8, 9, and 10, we have the decree of King Ahasuerus and Mordecai's elevation, because then, of course, the decree was reversed. And Mordecai gets actually all the real estate, the house that Haman had. And and not only, as you know later, not only Haman gets killed, and who else gets killed? Gets hanged. The 10 sons of Haman, they also get killed. So it pretty much killed his entire family because they were so wicked. So that's really how the book of Esther ends, with a decree of Ahasuerus and reversing, and then really the decree was about their ability to defend themselves, and people became very afraid then of the Jewish people, and some of them actually converted to Judaism because they were afraid of the retaliation, because they had such animosity going back and forth. So I'm not going to go to chapter 8, 9, and 10 for the sake of time, because our time is up, but I encourage you to read if you didn't already. It's really an amazing book, and that we should never forget how God saves his people, rescues people when his people put their trust in him. With that, we're going to take a 15-minute break and come back at 11 for worship. Thank you.